There's a kind of strength the world rarely understands, the strength of silence, the strength of those who walk away without a fight, without a farewell, without an explanation. We often mistake their quiet exit for weakness. But what if silence is the loudest scream of the soul? What if walking away is not running, but rising above confusion, chaos, and noise? In a world obsessed with closure, they are the ones who understand that not every story needs an ending. Sometimes peace is the period. Sometimes distance is the answer. Today we step into their world, the paradox, the mystery, the sacred calm of those who walk away without explaining. Stay with me. You might finally understand why silence can be the strongest voice of all. People who walk away without explaining understand something most never will. That connection is energy, not obligation. When the current stops, when the conversation starts to drain instead of feed, they feel it first. They don't wait for the argument, the disrespect, or the final breaking point. They sense when the vibration shifts, when peace starts costing too much. And quietly, without spectacle or resentment, they choose distance. It's not that they don't care. They care deeply. So deeply that they can't stand to keep pouring into something that no longer pours back. They've learned that peace cannot coexist with one-sided effort. That's why they don't always explain. Because explanation requires energy. And by the time they're walking away, their spirit has already given enough. They've reached that sacred point of realization. You can love people deeply and still outgrow their frequency. Their silence isn't revenge, it's release. They don't leave to make a point. They leave to protect their alignment. They've realized that sometimes closure doesn't come through conversation, but through acceptance. And that's where their strength lies. In choosing peace over proving, clarity over chaos, self-respect over the endless cycle of "let me explain." Because what's the use of explaining your heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it? They know that the right souls will never need convincing. The right energy will never require defense. So they walk, not in anger, but in awareness. They leave behind the noise, the confusion, the demand to justify what their intuition already decided. And in that quiet act of departure, they reclaim something precious. Their peace, their energy, their center. Walking away doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes, it's the highest form of wisdom, to know when something has ended and to honor that ending without apology. Those who walk away without explaining know the language of silence. And they speak it fluently. They've learned that when words fail to build bridges, silence builds boundaries. In a world that worships constant explanation, they choose quiet as their final statement. Because silence, when used with intention, isn't avoidance, it's authority. It says, "I've said enough. My peace matters more than my point." They understand that noise rarely heals misunderstanding. Sometimes, the more you try to explain yourself, the more your truth gets distorted. So they let silence do what words can't. Protect their dignity, preserve their energy, and keep their story pure. You see, silence makes people uncomfortable because it forces reflection. It echoes louder than explanations ever could. It asks questions that words would only soften. And that's the paradox. Their quiet isn't weakness, it's wisdom. They've learned that strength isn't found in winning every argument, but in knowing when not to participate in one. It takes courage to bite your tongue when your heart is begging to be understood. It takes power to walk away knowing your silence will say everything your words never could. And here's the truth. People who misunderstand you will twist your explanation too. So why waste your peace trying to translate your soul to someone who only listens to reply? They'd rather let silence do the talking, because silence never lies. It doesn't exaggerate. It doesn't defend. It doesn't beg to be right. It simply is. So when they walk away, they leave behind more than absence. They leave behind a mirror, because silence, when it follows truth, always reveals who is truly listening. Their quiet exit isn't empty, it's eloquent. It's not the sound of defeat, but the music of freedom. And the ones who notice their silence are often the ones who finally realize what their noise had hidden all along. It sounds contradictory, to walk away and still care deeply. But that's exactly what makes their strength so rare, so misunderstood, so sacred. They understand that love isn't proven by holding on, but sometimes by letting go quietly, because love that requires constant explanation was never truly listening in the first place. Walking away without bitterness isn't indifference, it's emotional maturity. It's saying, I wish you peace, but I choose mine first. It's a decision made not in anger, but in awareness that no one deserves to lose themselves trying to be understood. They've learned that not every connection must end in closure. Sometimes, closure comes from realizing that silence is the only answer left. And that's the paradox. They leave not because they stopped loving, but because they started loving themselves enough to stop bleeding. It's easy to stay and argue. It's easy to cling to half-love and call it loyalty. But it takes courage to walk away with grace instead of resentment. Their detachment isn't cold. It's compassionate. It's the kind of love that says, I still care about you, but not at the expense of my sanity. You see, deep souls don't walk away to punish. They walk away to preserve, because they know that forcing understanding is the slowest way to destroy connection. They don't slam doors. They simply stop knocking. And that kind of peace, the peace that comes from detachment, is not born from indifference. It's born from pain that's been processed and wisdom that refuses to repeat old wounds. They've learned that you can forgive in silence, release without warning, and love without returning. That's what true emotional freedom looks like. A soft heart behind strong boundaries. So when they walk away, they aren't turning their back on love. They're just returning to the only place they were ever meant to belong. Within themselves. Their silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the proof that they've finally mastered it. People often mistake silence for weakness, as if saying nothing means you have nothing to say. But for the ones who walk away quietly, silence is their final language. It is not empty. It is full of everything words could never hold. Their silence is not avoidance. It's precision. It's the understanding that sometimes words only tangle what the soul has already untied. Explanations may satisfy curiosity, but they rarely bring peace. And peace, not validation, is what these souls seek. When they leave without explaining, they're not being cruel. They're being kind in a way most people don't understand. Because every word they could have said would have fallen on ears that weren't ready to listen. And they know that you can't teach understanding to someone who's determined to misunderstand. So they let silence become the messenger. It's their way of saying, I've said all I needed to, just not out loud. There is an elegance in quiet departures, a dignity in not needing to prove your pain. Because when you know your worth, you no longer chase closure, you create it. Their silence carries boundaries sharper than words. It says, I'm done explaining myself to people who only hear what fits their comfort. It says, I choose peace over persuasion. It says, I still wish you well, just from afar. Silence, to them, is not passive. It's powerful. It's the declaration of a healed spirit that no longer needs to be understood to feel whole. And here lies the paradox. The quieter they become, the louder their truth resounds. Because while arguments echo briefly, silence lingers endlessly. It stays in the air, in the guilt, in the memory of what could have been said, but never was. Those who've mastered this silence have learned something profound. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, the absence of your voice is the only message that truly resonates. And so when they walk away without explaining, it's not because they stopped caring. It's because their silence has already said everything. To walk away without explaining is not an act of pride. It's an act of preservation. It's what happens when a soul decides that peace is more valuable than being understood. They do not leave because they stopped caring. They leave because caring too much was starting to break something inside of them. And when your peace begins to bleed, walking away becomes a form of healing. For them, departure isn't escape, it's return. A return to themselves, to the parts that got lost in trying to explain, defend, and justify. Because sometimes, in the noise of convincing others, we lose the quiet voice within that's been whispering, "This isn't good for you anymore." So they listen, and they leave. Without noise, without announcement, just the simple courage of choosing themselves. Again, it takes strength to fight, but it takes a different kind of strength to walk away. The kind that doesn't need witnesses or applause. The kind that values solitude over sympathy. Because while most people seek closure from others, these souls find it in the echo of their own footsteps fading away. They understand that explanations can chain you to the past, but silence sets you free. And in that freedom, they rediscover their stillness, their clarity, their worth. There's a quiet rebirth in walking away. It's the moment they stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and start saying, "Maybe it was meant to." They stop chasing validation and start walking toward inner peace. They lose people but find themselves. They leave behind stories unfinished, but their silence completes them. Because the truth is, not every ending needs an explanation. Some just need acceptance. So when you see someone walk away without a word, don't mistake it for indifference. It's often the softest, most sacred declaration of self-love. They are not running from others. They are returning home, back to their center, back to peace, back to themselves. So maybe walking away doesn't mean they stopped caring. Maybe it means they started caring differently. For themselves, for their sanity, for their peace. They don't chase understanding. They find it within. In their silence lies truth. A truth too heavy for words, too sacred for explanations. Because not every wound needs a witness, and not every ending needs applause. Some souls are meant to leave quietly, to teach us that closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes, it's just acceptance. So, if you've ever walked away and no one understood, don't worry. Your silence spoke louder than any words could. And that is the silent strength of people who walk away without explaining.